This is Heinrich from the Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns podcast. You're listening to one of the shows on the Self-Defense Radio Network. You can find all the other shows at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, the only man to shoot the same non-threat 4 times at Nationals, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear, where we counter the media's negative image of gun culture by introducing you to the amazing men and women who are involved in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. We're focusing on people, not politics. The everyday people from all walks of life, men and women who volunteer their time and effort, who spend their hard-earned dollars on travel, match fees, and gear to make this sport great. They're your doctors. They clean your teeth. They're fixing your houses, taking care of your pets. They fix your computers and pilot your planes, and they protect our streets and our nation. They are gun culture at its finest, and it's misunderstood or completely unknown to the mainstream media. Today, I'm going to introduce you to another one of these awesome people. But first, I want to thank today's sponsor. As we've heard on this show from match directors across the country, match directors face many challenges in running local or sanctioned matches. The weather is the most unpredictable and potentially the most ruinous. Nothing sucks the fun out of a perfectly planned match like shooting in the pouring rain or the sweltering heat, scoring soggy targets under plastic bags, or squinting at failing tablets that have been exposed to the heat of the midday sun. Whatever the challenge that nature throws your way, our friends at Match Shark can help. Match Shark's patent-pending target shields keep your targets dry even in heavy rain. They allow you to run your matches more smoothly because setup and teardown is easy, pasting is easier, scoring is easier, and for the shooter, you can see the target more clearly because you don't have to cover them in plastic bags. And their new line of tablet shades help you keep your tablets cool and extend the life of their batteries when they're exposed to sunlight all day. They reduce eye strain too, which makes tablet use much easier for your safety officers and shooters. Designed and manufactured here in the USA, owned and operated by shooters with years of experience in setting up and running matches, let Match Shark help you run your matches faster, smarter, and better. Check them out today at matchshark.com. Get everything you need to be prepared for your next match, just in case Mother Nature decides to show up and spoil things. Match Shark target shields and tablet shades can make it a better experience for your safety officers and for your shooters. Go to matchshark.com today. Our special guest today is Mark Compton from Savannah, Georgia. Mark, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks, Lloyd.
So tell us a little about yourself. Tell us what you do for a living there in Savannah.
Well, I work on telephone computer equipment, switches, routers, firewalls, mostly telephones, though. Okay. I've been doing this since 97, and it's a lot of fun. A lot of changes have happened in the last couple of years.
Yeah, just a few. So are you a Georgia native? I can't tell from the accent.
No, sir. I grew up in Minnesota.
That's kind of what I figured. It sounded more Midwestern than South Georgia. So how did you end up in Georgia, and where did the interest in firearms come from?
Well, I've always shot. Growing up, I lived on a farm. We'd go out hunting, we'd go out fishing, we'd just go out in the backyard and plink. Grew up on a farm in Moose Lake, Minnesota for a few years. We lived there. Ended up in Bemidji, Minnesota. My dad went to college there. I started my freshman year of high school, and he started his freshman year of college.
Oh, wow.
I went into the Army, Army Aviation, and ended up here in Savannah, Georgia at Hunter Army Airfield was my last duty station. I met my wife here, and the rest is history.
Very cool. Well, thank you for your service to our country. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Growing up hunting, was there a whole lot of, and then your military experience, was there a whole lot of exposure to handguns? What was the intro to handguns like?
Oh, I've always had a fascination with handguns, but growing up, we really didn't have but a couple of handguns. My dad had a couple of a couple of plinking 22s or BB guns or something like that. And they were just a hoot to shoot. He and I built several muzzle loaders. We'd get a muzzleloader kit and we'd assemble it on the kitchen table.
Nice.
Growing up in the military, aviation, if you were flight crew, you were issued a handgun. When I was at Fort Hood, it was revolver. That was the wonkiest revolver that I've ever seen. You flip it to the left, and the barrel would literally tilt to the left. Flip it to the right, and it'll flip to the right. It was qualifying with a handgun with those 38 revolvers was a very big challenge. We were stoked to get the M9s.
I'm sure. So I guess once you got into competitive shooting, it was like there was no interest whatsoever in taking up the revolver.
No. I've got a couple of revolvers. They're safe cleans.
Right. So how did you get interested in competitive shooting? What was the introduction there? Well,
it's funny how things kind of come full circle. I got out of the Army in '97. My wife was never anti-gun, but she didn't want the firearms around our very young children at the time. And, in 2011, my best man came into town. He was a military contractor and, had some time to kill. So, meeting him on a weekend, it's like, what are we going to do? Sunday afternoon, we went to the Eastman Gun Show and, picked up a little 22 semi-automatic 22 pistol. That was the best and worst decision I've ever made. Just laugh at all you want, but it was a Jennings J22.
Oh yeah.
And they get their nickname Jammings very righteously. From one magazine to the next, you didn't know if it was going to go bang or jam.
Right. A lot of practice clearing malfunctions.
Yeah. That was my first handgun, literally since I came back from Germany in '94. I had the privilege of touring the CZ factory and walked away from there with some very unique serial numbered CZ handguns. And, my dad ended up selling those. He misunderstood what I asked him to do, but that's for another story.
Well, I want to hear that story. How did you, what happened? Tell us about what was special about these guns and how did your dad misunderstand what you wanted to do with them?
Well, I walked in there, I was had a USR driver's license. I was qualified to drive the MWR vehicles all the way up to a 20-passenger van. Some Army officers and their wives, they wanted to go to Czechoslovakia. The wives, they all wanted to go to the crystal factories, and the guys, of course, hey, let's go tour the CZ factory.
Right.
What's that? I'm like, what's that? Okay, sure. And they're like, well, just bring cash. We've got your room and board and meals. We've got that all covered. We just need you to drive. And so bring whatever cash that you want to spend. Okay. Walked in there with about $1,200, and I walked out with 6 CZ75s and 6 CZ85s, and still had about $400 cash left.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And what's unique about them is that they were all uniquely serial numbered to my initials, 001, 002, and so on.
Wow. How cool.
Right?
That's awesome. So you brought them home, or you shipped them home?
I brought them home. Back then, it's very unique compared to today. You wouldn't get caught dead on an airplane with a handgun, but back then, I actually had to hand carry them through the airport and declare them, of course. And, they were still locked in their boxes. And when I flew back from Germany, it's up to the captain of the plane to decide where he wants you to store that. He opted for me to put them in the cockpit with him. And then about halfway through the flight back, he called me up to the bridge, and he wanted me to show him the guns. Anyways,
different times.
I really wasn't married to the guns at the time. I left him in Minnesota with my parents, left him with my dad, and gave him the instructions to, I wanted a set. He could have a set. My brother could have a set if he wanted, and the rest he could sell off if he wanted. Well, he managed to, he brought the whole collection to a gun show and sold them all to a collector for a very pretty penny.
So, well, did he at least share the profits with you?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
As much money as he made, I really couldn't be upset about it.
Right.
The collector, his initials were apparently also MC, so he was able to just drool over him and snatch him up.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. So how did you go from the Jennings 22 to competition shooting?
A couple months later, I was at my office. I had just picked up a rifle. This was a Ruger 1022. Again, I'm not very familiar with firearms at this point. This was a Saturday afternoon. I went into my office and saw the cleaning lady was there, and I talked to her briefly before I brought a firearm into the office. I told her, hey, I'm going to check this out on Ruger's website, make sure that there isn't any recalls or whatever on it. And she's like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. And talked to her a little bit. She had some computer work that needed to be done. I had to fix her son's computer and get a new power supply for a laptop and stuff like that. And instead of paying me for any of that, she brought in some of her dad's guns, calls me to the office, and she had 3 handguns laid out, and one of them was a Ruger P95, and that's, she says, here, instead of paying you for what you've done, I'd like to give you one of these instead. Little barter trading system.
Right.
Good to go. Anyways, her father had passed away and left her all sorts of guns, and she wanted information on how she could sell them, and so I helped her with that a little bit. And in addition to the computer work, this is what she paid me with. And I went to the shooting range, and a buddy of mine, Tang Dallo, he's like, great, now you've got something that you can compete with. Let's go to an IDPA match. That was August of 2011.
So you kind of accidentally fell into it. It was like,
yeah, pretty much. I'd go to the range, and my daughter and I'd go to the range, and we'd plank and shoot, and I'd see Tang come in there Saturday afternoon, and he's sitting there at the counter cleaning guns, and it's like he's showing off some videos, and it's like, you know what, that looks like a lot of fun. I'd like to do that. And he invited me several times, and finally I had something that I could compete with, so I went out there with him. And that was Low Country IDPA. I still belong to that club. Shoot there whenever I can. And they're in Springfield, Georgia.
And now you are not only a member of that club, but you're a match director. You're running the Sand Gnat Challenge, and talk about what changed between the time that you went to that first local match and now to becoming a match director
Well, that first match, I was an absolute nervous ninny. Aren't we all?
Yeah.
My goal was don't get DQ'd, and so I'm literally walking the stage. I'm not, I'm seeing all these other guys running from position to position. I'm walking,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got the gun pointed at the ground, directly in front of my feet, and I get this, some guy tells me something. I can't hear him. I've got earplugs in, and Tang looks at me and he says, "Just nod and say thank you." I looked at the guy and nodded and said thank you. And come to find out about 6 months later that I almost swept my foot and almost got DQ'd. And, a couple of years later, I've had, several matches under my belt. I've picked up a little USPSA. I know you're not talking about that in this, but started doing that a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm shooting and having fun. My daughter comes out there with me, and she's shooting a little bit here and there. Got her started with a 22, shooting not for competition, and it was father-daughter time.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years go by, and we had a change in match director, and Ryan Bevel was going to be the match director, and at Low Country, and he looks at me, and he knows my background. He knows that I'm into computers, and he says, "Find something other than paper to score." He goes, "I don't care what it is. Papers for the birds, papers for making paper airplanes. Find something else."
Mm-hmm.
A couple months later, I ended up going to a work-related thing up in Atlanta, and on the way up there, the day before, I talked to a buddy of mine, Alan Patterson. "Hey, I'm coming up to Atlanta. Find us a match." And so he found us a match in Monroe, Georgia, and that's where I met Robert Arnold. And I walked into the match, and Robert hands me this tablet, and "Here, put your information in here." And well, this is practice score. I've used this with USPSA down in Brunswick.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at him and I said, "Do you mind if I run this the whole match, except of course when I'm shooting?" He goes, "Knock yourself out." So that's how I got started with that side of it. And the following month, I bought a handful of Nook Simple Touch tablets, and figured out that I could run practice score off my cell phone. And that first time we did it, I ran practice score master off of my cell phone, and then ran Nook Simple Touch, and we did it simultaneous paper scoring and tablets. We had that first match, had one squad. The safety officers looked at that and go, "This is too complicated," and shoved it aside. And and three squads that embraced it, and we were able to publish those scores within 15 minutes after the last shots. And everybody was like, "What? 15 minutes and we've got scores?" We wouldn't get scores, and sometimes for 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh gosh.
And it just depended on how fast and how busy the match director was.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, and I think they were doing the scoring on that old software, Beach Bunny or something like that.
So you sold them on this new technology, and they then recognized you as a match directing wizard, and then decided you were you were the next sucker who was going to get all the work, or
not exactly. So I helped out, and I went to every match that I could, and the matches that I didn't go to, I made sure that somebody was capable of doing that. I even set up a training class to show other people how to use practice score.
Okay.
and it was a pretty decent class. We held that at Roy Bridge's house. The guy's got a really nice range right in his backyard, and we were able to practice not only shooting but practice running the tablet and and running corrective scoring and stuff like that, and just trying to get other people involved with practice score, and it's paid off.
Nice.
Then 2016, actually back up just a little bit. 2015, September of 2015, I get a call from a buddy, Jeremy Turner. Jeremy says, "Hey, there's this new range that's being built right now near Richmond Hill, Georgia. Can you meet us out there? Meet a handful of us out there. We're going to meet with the owners and see what we've got to play with."
Mm-hmm.
And I met up with Toby Hansen, and he's showing us the new bays that they had 100-yard range at the time and a 50-yard range. And both of them had just been freshly hydroseeded, so we weren't really able to walk on that. But then we walk around the edge of the 50-yard, and he says, "See all this? What do you want here?" I'm not a good judge of area, but this is enough space for 3 working bays.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of matches do you guys want to do? So we kind of drew it out on a napkin, and they played around with it and got the dozers out there, and they fixed it up pretty decent. They got us a small utility storage, a little 20-foot container, and then invited us out again in, I think we had our first meeting out there. Let's see, that was March of 2016, early March. We bought a handful of, target stands and bought a box of IDPA targets and figured, let's throw something together. And we advertised a bunch and, just on social media and whatnot. And we had our first unofficial IDPA match sometime in March of 2016. We had 60 shooters and probably 40 or so spectators. Maybe it's the other way around.
Oh, wow.
So it was. I think it was the other way around, because a couple weeks later, I think it was the other way around. We had 60 shooters and 40 or so spectators, and it's like trying to figure out where our limits are.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, it was a really good time. We a couple months later, we signed up as an IDPA club. That was 25th of May, and 1 year later, we had the first Sand Gnat Challenge. Staff Day was on the 25th of May.
What did you envision doing a sanctioned match as early as that 2015 date, or how did you? At what point did you say, you know what, we should put on our own sanctioned match?
We talked about that at our very first meeting, and I'm like, guys, I don't think we've got enough space to do something like that. Let's maybe consider doing that in 2017 or 2018. And then, over the course of the year, the range owners, they remodeled or they widened the bays or widened the range a little bit, and they built what I call bays 1 and 2. And it's like, okay, now we can put together some kind of sanctioned match, but I don't want to do it. Not yet, anyways. I get a call from Chad Barber. He was our area coordinator at the time. Love the guy to death. He's an awesome, awesome guy. If you've ever met Chad, I really encourage you to get him on this show.
Okay.
Anyways, Chad and I, didn't always see eye to eye on what we were doing, what our goals were. I think he was more encouraging than I really wanted him to be. But it worked out. I get a call from Chad, and he basically says, "Hey, I've given your phone number to Robert Ray. Be on the lookout for a phone call. They're going to ask you if you can put together a sanctioned match in our area at your club." And I'm like, "How did this happen?" And he says, he basically says, "Well, there's been an issue with the Alabama state match and the Tennessee state match. Alabama hadn't shot a club level match since they renovated their range, and they wouldn't be able to get that until just before their normal Alabama state match. So it kind of they basically said, no, we're not going to throw something together without knowing the new rule book."
Mm-hmm.
And that's, that was a big issue there, is the IDPA threw that new rule book out, and everybody was pretty uncomfortable with it right at first, and having one club match under your belts wasn't a good idea. And then something with the Tennessee state, I don't recall what that issue was, but anyways, so, and Tennessee state was normally in June, I believe. And so Robert calls me and he says, "Hey, can you throw something together?" And I'm like, "Let me get back to you." He called me like 2 minutes after Chad called me, and I didn't have a chance to call everybody else. Anyways, I talked to Ian Mercer. Ian's been the assistant match director all 3 years of the Sand Gnat Challenge. He's been the lead IDPA match director at our club, at 17 South Rod and Gun Club.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, talked to him and talked to a few others, and they're like, "Well, yeah, we can do that." So we held our first meeting and planned for the first Sand Gnat Challenge. And we envisioned it just as a backup gun only match. Well, that evolved into we had to open it up to compact carry pistol due to the lack of participation.
Mm-hmm.
And we about doubled our registration almost overnight when we did that. That first match in 2017, we had 61 shooters, 34 of us were staff. So it was, wow. I'm thinking in the back of my head that, you know what, we're not going to do this next year. Nobody wants to do this. And, I got phone calls and text messages and messages on Facebook, and, starting a couple months after the match, "Hey, when are you going to announce 2018's Sand Gnat Challenge?" And I'm like, "Really? You guys want to shoot this? Are you sure about that?" And anyways, they're all very encouraging, and so we put it together. We went from 61 shooters, tier 2 match. No drawing on the clock, no reloads on the clock. Everything was at the low ready or hidden gun or table starts or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Did that in 2017 to, let's go ahead and open this up to CCP from day one, and we're going to make sure that everybody's got a holster, everybody's got mag pouches if that's what they need. We're not going to include revolver because we only had 3 revolvers for the 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that was backup gun revolver. So it was,
right.
Nobody wanted to shoot that. Anyways, so we opened it up to CCP, drawing from the holster, reloads on the clock, the whole 9 yards, and it just brought that match up a level. So many words of encouragement from competitors from 2017 and 2018. I think 2018 we had 113 shooters that had signed up, and then 2019, just this past April, we did our 3rd year. We had 157 that showed up. So it's like, yeah, we got this. I think we're good. So
when you first started, let's go back to 2016. You're prepping for this match for 2017, and you were kind of doing it because it sort of fell in your lap with all these other area matches that didn't come off. How much prep time did you actually have between, okay, yeah, we can do this, to hammer down?
We were officially on the books to do the 2017. We officially made the announcement in February of 2017, and we had stages to design, advertisement to do, sponsors to get, stuff like that. We literally had from February until May.
Oh my God!
And I don't recommend that.
Right, because we've had a number of match directors on the show before, and they talk about, oh yeah, as soon as one's finished, you start planning for the next one. I can't imagine compressing that down to 3 months.
And that's actually what everybody's been saying is, get it on the books, get it going, get the announcements going. And this year, after this year's Sand Gnat, I think we announced the 2020 Georgia State IDPA Championship at the match. During the safety brief, I made that announcement that, oh, by the way, we are going to be on board to do the 2020.
Nice.
And so we opened the registration up. Some people say it's too early. Some people say that it's great that we did it this early. Gives them a chance to put in for the time off of work. But we opened up registration July 15th at noon. We had, I believe that it was 100 plus shooters by midnight.
Wow.
and today we kicked it to 200.
Awesome. I usually, would talk about how shooters felt at their, shooting their first match. And you talked about the nervous jitters at your first local match. What was more stressful? Was it that first sanctioned match that you shot, or the first sanctioned match that you actually had to put together and run?
Oh God, I was almost in tears doing that first year doing the Sand Gnat Challenge. I had one of my best friends, Chris McNeil. He pulled me aside. On staff day, he says, "Hey, we need to talk. You need to calm down. You need to take a deep breath. Everything's going to turn out just fine." And it just kind of put a lot of that into perspective. And the moment that he said that, it's like relaxed.
Mm.
He stood beside me all 3 years, and I think that he's on board for the 2020. Chris is an awesome guy.
What's in, since that fast 3-month prep for the very first Sand Gnat, and between then and your third now, what's one thing that you would say you've learned over that time, or maybe what's the most important thing that you've learned from putting together that first one to running the third one and now prepping for the state match in 2020? What's the biggest lesson that you've learned in those 3 previous matches?
Well, I'd have to say, get your T-shirt order in early.
It's not what I was expecting.
This last year, 2017, we didn't do match T-shirts. We just didn't have the budget. We did that whole match. I want to say our budget was $3,600 that we took in, and that included cash sponsors as well as match fees. We put out over $3,400.
Oh wow!
And that didn't include the staff shirts. We ended up. I coordinated that with a local company. They did the staff shirts, and it ended up costing each of us $25 for if you wanted that shirt. And it was, it wasn't that we didn't want to give them a shirt. We didn't have the budget.
Right.
I need to throw a shout out to my daughter, Sarah. She's the one that designed the Sand Gnat Challenge logo.
Love it. Good job, Sarah.
the very first meeting that we had, we did this at IHOP in Savannah. Commandeered the back room, had, 10, 15 of us that showed up for that. And I brought her with me. Earlier that day, I had thrown this pamphlet together and, very crudely took a photo of a microscoped sand gnat and just dropped it on the front cover of this. And while we're waiting for everybody to show, I said, "Hey, can you draw this?" She's a super artist. "Can you draw this as a cartoon holding a gun?" She goes, "Yeah, sure." 10 minutes later, that's the logo that we've got.
Very nice. As we're kind of wrapping things up, and I hope you'll come back for and talk about next year's state match and preview it for us. But to wrap up our conversation tonight, you've gone from shooting a Jennings Jam-O-Matic to running one of the best and most sought after matches of the season. Now going on your fourth year, and the next year is going to be even bigger as a state match. What is it about this sport that has so thoroughly taken over a part of your life and got you this involved to where you would invest this much time and effort? What is it about IDPA that makes it so much fun for you that you would do this?
The people.
Oh, that's a cop-out question. That's a cop-out answer.
No, the people. I've from the very first match, I was treated so well. Every match, I may not hold this torch very well because I can certainly not hold it very well sometimes. But from the very first match, people were encouraging. They were helpful. They made some suggestions. They were very friendly and they were very inviting, and enough for me to come out and do it again and again and again and again, and then step up and become a safety officer and keep going and keep going and keep going, enough to become a CSO. And then when it came my turn to step up and be a match director, I threw my hat in that ring, and here I am. But it is absolutely the people. It's the people of this sport and other shooting sports. They make it so inviting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and for everything that you're doing. And I'm hoping I get to see you at the Sheepdog later this year. And if not, I'll definitely I'll pencil in the Georgia State for next year.
Game on. Thanks, Lloyd.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our guest for coming on the show and our sponsors for making all of this possible. Take a moment, if you would, to check out the website, check out our show notes at unloadpodcast.com. We've got lots of interviews with more amazing guests like the one you heard today. Join our Facebook group at unloadpodcast.com/Facebook for all the latest updates and to connect with other fans of the show. And if you'd like to support the show, we sure would appreciate it. Consider becoming a patron at unloadpodcast.com/extra. I've got some full-length interviews and special content available there exclusively for patrons as well. And if you know somebody or you yourself would make an interesting guest for a future episode of Unload and Show Clear, please contact me at lloyd@unloadpodcast.com or click on the contact page on the website and send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Tune in again next time for another episode of Unload and Show Clear.